rap battles of history. Catra
I'm gonna drop out of the rap race and battle all the time.
versus Yotsuba.
They want me to fight a 5-year-old?
Begin!
You're meaner than yanda.
Do you really think that?
Mm-hmm.
I need a minute to think about this.
For those of you who don't get the joke, Yanda literally did 9/11.
In 2011, hit television network The Hub began airing perhaps its greatest contribution to children's television, Dan Versus. During its run, The Hub was primarily known for being a network that appealed to young girls, with shows like My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, Strawberry Shortcake, Pound Puppies, and Littlest Pet Shop. I watched all of these except Strawberry Shortcake because even though I was more secure in my masculinity then than I am now, I had to draw the line there so it wasn't put in jeopardy. But I never watched Dan Versus because it seemed like an adult show. Clearly I wasn't its target audience if it had jokes like this.
This is vandalism. The worst ism there is, if you don't count fascism.
Like, I wasn't gonna get that as an 8-year-old, but that's the thing. Dan Versus wasn't an adult show. It was originally pitched as one, but it was rejected. This ultimately made the final product better. It was a boundary-pushing kids show. There was truly nothing else like it, and airing alongside Pinkie Pie made it stand out even more. Instead of relying on profanity, gore, and shock humor like so many adult comedies did before and after, the limitations of the target audience made it so that they could tell good jokes instead. Sure, having Vivzy Pop in the writing room can be funny sometimes, but hearing fuck 12 million times loses its luster after a while. Dan Versus kept things fresh by making biting commentary about jury duty and the DMV and corporations outcompeting small businesses way before Teen Titans Go made it cool to explain the abolition of the gold standard to 4-year-olds. But that's the thing. Were kids the target audience? Fuck no, they weren't. The show cold opens with a joke about tax evasion. This show was not made for kids. It just happened to be made in a fashion that kids could enjoy it if they really tried. Don't believe me? Listen to some of these awesome Google reviews. I honestly really like this show. It is one of the only adult cartoons that doesn't use dirty jokes to make you laugh your butt off. Basically, it is an adult show that kids can watch too. I'm Chaff. Dan Versus is a show about an angry short man that gets revenge on everybody. I love it and I watch it on Tubi. I don't really know what age of audience they're trying to achieve. This is like a kid show trying to be an adult show or something like that. It's kind of funny show, but I don't think it's worth spending so much time. I guess it's just a meh. You know what? Fuck you, BitPix. Learn to be more like Chaff. I think Dan Versus had a really fascinating approach to media creation, resulting in an extremely niche audience. An audience that didn't even start following the show until years after it stopped airing. It was a great show, and it will continue to have a greater legacy than the third Strawberry Shortcake iteration, because it wasn't just trying to be a disposable piece of art meant to hold the attention of a specific audience. It was a show with a message and a purpose, and it was a true reflection of what the creators wanted to make. Sure, it was limited by the network and the executives, but in the long run, those limitations only bred creativity. It found its niche audience, and that's the greatest thing that can happen when executives derail your artistic vision. But ultimately, the roadblock of corporate intervention is something that's all but eroding with modern media, and for good reason. The best media is created not to appeal to a specific audience, and especially not to make money off a specific audience. Dan Versus was basically the only original property of note on the Hub. It was a network that carried on the philosophy of 1980s cartoons, where the reason they existed was to sell toys. That's why not a single soul alive cares about the 1980s Pound Puppies cartoon, and only 2 souls, me and my sister, care about the 2011 one. Is Lucky from Pound Puppies hot?
Ooh, you know what? As a kid, I always kind of thought his voice was awesome. And as an adult, I kind of still think he is, yeah, a little bit.
Of course the white woman would find him hot. A great example of this tactic was She-Ra, Princess of Power, a 1985 He-Man spinoff that was created solely to sell the toy line to a female audience. I'll be honest, right out the gate though, I only watched like 4 episodes of this show because I originally started writing with the assumption that it was bad. But quite frankly, for a show made for the purpose of selling toys, it could have been much worse. I actually have a lot of respect for the fact that it was targeted at female audiences and yet didn't completely shy away from heavier topics. The first couple episodes talk about how the Horde, which is an evil group led by Hordak, wants to enslave innocent civilians and blow up the houses of people who complain about taxes.
Hi, Dan.
I don't care who the law sends, I am not paying taxes. Catra!
I was actually surprised to see that people who watched the show generally liked it on IMDb. The women who reviewed it found it empowering, the men thought it was cool, and both of those groups fucking hate Power Rangers for some reason. But personally, I'm not a big fan. I've seen some real trash from the 1980s, like the Heathcliff cartoon and some of the Hanna-Barbera cartoons at the time, and this is great in comparison, but you can really feel the corporate executive vibe in a lot of the annoying side characters. Catra and Scorpia are painfully bland antagonists, bringing almost nothing new to the table except in Catra's case, tinnitus. You can tell Catra only only exists because the executives thought merchandise of a Catwoman would sell like hotcakes, and if anime merchandise is anything to go by, they were right and will continue to be right for all of eternity. Other marketable characters include Boring Horse, and Annoying
Twig it.
What the fuck? You can't say that. Like, genuinely, I'm pretty sure if they entirely removed Bo's annoying Furby thing and the cringe cat, the show would be infinitely better. Oh, thank God. She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, the 2018 reboot, is a solid contender for my favorite Western cartoon. It has all of the things I liked about the original and more, and removes everything bad, with the exception of the music. The music was so fucking ballin' in the 1980s version. It had awesome synth-led action music that was both catchy and perfectly fitting for the scenes it was used in. The vibes were incredible. Meanwhile, the reboot will have scenes where they arrive at a place that's a mixture between Alcatraz and hell itself, and where their friend has been wrongfully imprisoned, and follow it up with, "We're on the edge of greatness." But let's talk about those things that I liked. Adora was a great character in the original, being a competent, strong, courageous woman who was so focused on doing what's right that she was willing to leave her life behind to make sure she was actually on the side of justice. She was raised by the Horde her entire life, being kidnapped by them as a baby, and then trained as a soldier to fight for their cause. The problem being, the Horde is evil. Its leader, Hordak, was hell-bent on inducting people into the Horde so that they would serve him unconditionally, and all opposition would be destroyed or enslaved. Adora was raised very close to Hordak, but was sheltered in a way that she didn't know what was happening to the people outside of the Fright Zone where she was raised. She was led to believe that Hordak was a kind ruler, and only when she ventures out does she realize that she's been Mussolini's right-hand man the whole time. This leads her to join the rebellion and fight the forces that raised her from infancy. Oh, and she's She-Ra, the character the show's named after. She uses the sword to become Strong Woman, and that's really the depth of her character in the original. After the origin story, the show kinda just becomes her using her She-Ra powers to fight Hordak and his minions, which is cool and all, but I want more out of my main characters. I want depth. In the 2018 show, pretty much all of this applies, but now the lingering scars of her upbringing stay with her and inform her future actions. She was raised in a militaristic environment where all good things are earned through success on the battlefield. This means that when she gets inducted into the rebellion in the reboot, she has to cope with the fact that everything she's known for her entire life has been a lie. She has to internalize that the correct side are the people she's been rigorously trained to kill for her entire life. She has to trust those she's been told will ultimately betray her. The only reason she's able to acknowledge the truth is because the kindness the rebellion treats her with is a kindness that she only rarely experienced in her old environment. A kindness that certain others never received at all. Well, that and watching her old allies constantly commit acts of terrorism probably helped her make a decision too. If the awards this show received are anything to go by, this is a family show that kids watch with their parents. I'm pretty sure that's probably the intention, but I find it extremely weird that a show with that target audience in mind would have such heavy theming of, if your family is evil and does evil things, you can leave them and find a new family. And that's far from the last family-related theme this show will tackle. So let's talk about this found family that Fedora finds. Bo is awesome. Despite being exclusively equipped with the world's worst weapon, he can take out literally any foe by just being better than them. He could shoot Thanos once and it would reverse the snap. He doesn't have any magic powers like the rest of the princesses I'm not going to talk about. He just has sheer positivity and friendship that are so powerful that reality will bend to his will. He's also great representation for homosexual men that like women for some reason. That's so me. Glimmer is a controversial character among She-Ra fans in that she is flawed and not perfect. She's impulsive, responds poorly to authority, both when she's put under it and when she has it herself, and she cares about her friends, the last of which makes people the most upset. For the first half of the show, she has a very rebellious attitude towards her mother, because her mother wants to keep her as safe as possible by keeping her out of harm's way. This ends up taking away some of Glimmer's autonomy, because Glimmer wants to go out and fight the Horde with the rest of her friends, but since it's dangerous to do that, her mother frequently tries to stop her and criticizes her for doing things that are impulsive, and doubts her abilities to take care of herself, standard overprotective parent kind of stuff. It all comes from a place of love and sincere desire to keep her safe, but it's at the expense of her autonomy, so obviously that's going to cause a rift. Major spoiler time, please watch the show if you haven't. Timestamps are in the description along with just so much other stuff. The latter half of the show and the turning point in Glimmer's character comes in the form of a moment where her mother has to sacrifice herself to win a battle. It's a really emotional scene, but I saw it like a year ago and I'm a big girl now, so I'm over it and I'm going to talk about the thematic relevance. In a sense, her sacrifice completely legitimized the concerns she told Glimmer she had. The battle literally resulted in her death. What if it had been Glimmer who died instead? That would have been the worst possible outcome for everyone. Glimmer is met with the greatest loss she's ever faced, and the emotions begin to flood. Not only did this prove her mother was right the whole time, that there are battles too tough to take on and live, but it also proved that the whole time her mother was truly acting out of love. She wasn't being needlessly stubborn or obstinate, she was rightfully scared of the worst possible outcome, and she loved her daughter to the bitter end. So of course, these realizations manifest themselves in Glimmer mirroring her mother's retroactively understandable actions. It's the worst feeling in the world to have someone you need to protect, and failing to do so. Although Glimmer doesn't have a daughter of her own, she does have someone she needs to protect in the form of Adora. If Adora goes out and gets herself killed in battle, Glimmer will not only have lost her best friend, but also the prophesized chosen one who's supposed to bring world peace. So naturally, Glimmer takes on more responsibility for herself so that Adora won't go out and fight recklessly and get herself killed. It's at this point that the show, to me, stops feeling like a show for kids. Up to this point, the primary dynamic of the protagonist trio is the typical kids show affair of a bunch of friends who win every battle with the power of friendship. But from this point onwards, death and loss are ever-present threats, and the tone shifts from a childish optimism to one where every character has their own internal conflicts. Instability goes from a rarity to the norm. Glimmer has to figure out the same thing her mother struggled with. Is it better to provide complete autonomy, or to take it away for the sake of protecting the friends she cares about? Can she make the correct decision without falling into her old character flaw of being reckless and impulsive? Is Adora the one being reckless and impulsive? Bo has to figure out whether or not he likes men. I hope he figures it out soon. And Adora, well, it's hard to truly grasp Adora's internal conflict without talking about something very important. This guy, Seahawk. Seahawk's my favorite. He's funny and I like him and he's my favorite. I want him so— What do you mean he likes women? At least he picked Mermista, who's literally me. In other news, Catra. Catra's the greatest character in fiction. I'm the biggest hyperbole fan I know, but I need you to realize that I'm not actually kidding this time. Here's my ordered top 50 characters for proof. The top 5 are basically interchangeable, but as of writing, she's number 1. I straight up have used Catra tier to describe my top tier of every tier list I've made as like a running joke for the last year. And I fucking hate her. When it comes to media written for younger audiences, there's basically 3 types of antagonists you're allowed to have. The first is Dr. Heinz Doofenshmirtz. This is the type of person who's ultimately good at heart, but tries to be evil for some reason. Maybe he has a tragic backstory, like being raised by absentee parents that treated him like an inanimate object and eventually offloaded their parenting job onto ocelots. You know, that kind of stuff. They're evil, but they're also usually incompetent and are intended to be more funny than anything else. Characters like Team Rocket, Lord Boxman, Bling Bling Boy, characters of that nature. This is the most common antagonist in kids shows because you can't have your villain be too evil or kids get scared. The second is Big Jack Horner, the villain that's so comically evil that there's not a bit of good to them. Their backstories aren't delved into and they're just evil for the hell of it. This is what my understanding of Hordak from the original series fell into. He wants mass slavery because it benefits him and nothing else. This type of villain can work well and be charming, but they're mostly flat evil characters that exist only to be foiled by the protagonist. This type is used in kids media when the kids aren't supposed to have any deeper thoughts about the antagonist at all, they just want to see the protagonist win. The last type is Toffee, the one who lurks behind the shadows and wants power more than actually to be evil. It's not a lack of a moral compass like the second kind, and it's not a quirky, silly little world domination plot like the first kind. Usually it's either that they're the boss of the antagonist you normally see, like Giovanni is to Team Rocket, or they're revealed to be the big bad near the end of the story. Usually the antagonists either lack real depth or are made otherwise palatable by having them be funny, incompetent, or obviously redeemable. Now, this isn't to say that any of these archetypes are bad or anything, far from it. I love all of the characters I listed, but they all feel a little toothless, like they're just bad guys that need to be thwarted and that's the end of it. No need to look at their deeper motivations or themes or anything. The Doofenshmirtz archetype is different in that there's usually something deeper, but that usually comes at the expense of them being legitimately threatening. It's super interesting that Doofenshmirtz is an evil scientist who actually loves and cares for his daughter, and is a morally upstanding citizen so long as he hasn't been recently wronged by society, because his evilness only goes so far as his motivations. But when shows go out of their way to humanize the villain, they usually go so far that the villains end up being lovable goofball troublemakers as opposed to being truly evil. Because as everyone knows, kids can't possibly comprehend the idea that somebody can simultaneously do bad things and be human at the same time, which is why there is in fact a fourth type, Catra. Catra is one of the meanest characters I've ever seen in a kid's show, or a show in general. When she's introduced, she's not even explicitly stated as the antagonist yet, but we see her as dishonest and manipulative and willing to do whatever it takes to get ahead. One of her first lines is, "You know nothing's too low for me." As the show progresses, she begins to gain influence. Her complete disregard for others impresses Hordak, and they form a sort of alliance. He grants her power and status, and she helps further his mission. She's not actually loyal to him per se, she's actually entirely self-serving. She gives negative shits about his mission. She only does it because it gives her power. She usually uses this power in a way that hurts others. She's a ruthless authority figure who doesn't give a fuck about what her subordinates feel as long as they get shit done for her. She's violent, she lashes out at everyone, and she refuses to show kindness because she's fearful that doing so would be a weakness. She's so legitimately, hauntingly evil that by the time she's at her lowest, it's a genuine moral quandary to even ask if she's worthy of redemption. Kids shows love making their opinions very clear on the subject. If it's a Doofenshmirtz, then of course he can be steered right. He was a good guy the whole time who just fell off the path of righteousness. If it's a big Jack Horner, then of course not. He was literally gonna throw the world into the sun. There's no redeeming that. They don't pull any punches making Catra evil. She's as close to BoJack Horseman as a kid's show can possibly get. Her negative behaviors push everyone she knows away, and they perpetuate a downward spiral that only result in anger, fear, and loneliness growing stronger. And the worst part is that it's clear that only so much of the blame can be put on her past. At a certain point, it's her own stubbornness that perpetuates the spiral. It's legitimately hard to watch because you know the whole time there's only one thing that can get her out of it: a friend who can pull her out by force. Catra is accompanied by two of my other favorite characters in fiction, Entrapta and Scorpia. Scorpia carries on the legacies of Dr. Doofenshmirtz by being the evil person with a second heart instead of a brain. She's only evil because she literally has never seen a non-evil perspective. In any other timeline, Scorpia would be fighting for the good guys because she loves and cares for everyone without question, unless she's directly told that they are her enemy. Her traits beautifully clash with Catra. They have to work together because they're both equally powerful and on the same side, but they could not be more different. Whereas Catra's the animal that wins, that will scratch and bite and claw and bite and punch, Scorpia is the animal that doesn't and winds up Catra's la 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 lunch. I'm just saying, both Scorpia and Catra ultimately want to have friends that they can rely on, but their methodologies are very different. Scorpia's method is,
"You're my friend now. We're having soft tacos later."
and Catra's strategy is being a little bitch who can't trust that anybody could be kind and not 100% self-serving. So despite Scorpia's absolute best efforts to be her friend, the only single thing that works to get them closer together is success on the battlefield. Because to Catra, love isn't something you're given, it's something you earn. And someone who's extremely capable of earning Catra's praise is Entrapta. Her whole deal is that she struggles with human interaction and specializes in engineering and technology. Her fixation on technology puts her on the side of the bad guys entirely accidentally, simply because the Horde really want her expertise. So they give her all the resources necessary to do what she wants. Which, can I just say, is an extremely funny thing to just casually put into a show like this. Like, it wouldn't be a Duppy video if I didn't have a Marxism section, so here it is. Entrapta is a stand-in for the entire process of scientific research in capitalist societies. Science cannot exist without funding, and Entrapta ends up being funded by evil people. Much like how in real life, companies can put millions of dollars into research that they can exploit to use for marketing materials. Just imagine that the Horde is ExxonMobil, and they're giving the money to Entrapta to make research about how fossil fuels don't contribute to climate change. Anyways, Entrapta naturally becomes someone who Catra trusts because she has meritocratically earned it. Her work makes Catra stronger. So when it turns out that Entrapta actually does have a moral code and doesn't want her research to result in people suffering, she defects back to the side of good and breaks Catra's trust, just like everyone else in her life. The primary negative influence in Catra's life is her abusive surrogate mother, Shadow Weaver. Shadow Weaver is shown to be ruthless and abusive to Catra, but there's one twist that separates this from the last two videos where I talked about generational trauma. She's not an egalitarian abuser. She was a perfectly fine maternal substitute to Adora. Adora and Catra were both taken in by the Horde and trained under Shadow Weaver. They underwent combat training on a regular basis because they lived in a militaristic environment. Most of their childhood consisted of learning how to survive and thrive in battle. But because Adora is the chosen one and was inevitably going to become She-Ra, she was the drill sergeant's favorite. The stronger Adora became, the more of an asset She-Ra would be to the Horde. And Shadow Weaver's way of ensuring that this would happen was to be harsh to literally everyone except Adora, which seems extremely counterproductive, honestly, but it makes a little bit of sense if you view it from the lens of, no matter what, Adora was going to be the strongest one when she figured out she was She-Ra, so there was no point in expecting anything unrealistic. She was destined for greatness no matter what. Catra, on the other hand, wasn't given an IOU from power from God herself. She had to fight tooth and nail to even be the second best. So Shadow Weaver set unrealistically high standards for Catra that she can never live up to, and turned her approval into a reward that would only be granted if she was the best that ever was. Shadow Weaver is largely responsible for most of the antisocial behaviors that make Catra as mean as she is. Everything Catra isn't directly mirroring from her is something that she developed as a defense mechanism against her. She can't show kindness because kindness is a weakness on the battlefield. She had to be aggressive and violent because these were the traits that resulted in her success. She has to be the best possible because not being the best means you will never receive love. And she can't trust anyone because the only people who care about her either abuse her or leave her. So all this to say, this is a really risky character to include in a show intended for young audiences. Who's to say that the kids watching are even going to understand the complexities of Catra's personality and upbringing? What if they instead only see that she's mean and then call it a day? Hell, I know fully grown media literate adults that don't care about or don't see the nuance. And that's why this show has a mo-fucking redemption arc. And that redemption is lesbian. There's so much more I could say about that show and its characters, but that's not what this video is about. I don't want to spoil anything else. Like, I could easily talk for 20 more minutes about Catra, but if you really want that, check out these awesome videos that I'll link in the description that do it better than I can. While She-Ra She-Ra 2018 is absolutely a family show, if you will. I genuinely spent so much of the show thinking to myself, who is the target audience here? I've seen animated shows for basically every audience under the sun. All ride or die PB&J Otter if I have to, so I'm pretty well versed in what the conventions are for shows intended for certain audiences. And so, of course, when I boiled down She-Ra to its absolute core tenets, which is no matter how bad the world becomes, love and friendship will prevail over evil, I automatically think, oh, it's My Hero Academia. This is a show for teenage boys. But wait, no, that can't be right. The main protagonist is a woman. Therefore, this is literally My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. So this is actually a show for young girls. But that feels weird, right? One half is a warrior princess who has to fight evil, which is the plot of a kid's show, and the other half is a story of a traumatized, emotionally unstable person who has to serve a fascist, fundamentalist Christian? I mean, I didn't get those vibes, but I guess Wikipedia does have a point. Shout out to the separation of church and state. She-Ra has always felt to me like the writers had a deep story they wanted to tell using these old characters, but because they were adapting a kid's show, they had to keep that vibe going. It didn't feel limited by the medium they chose. They use gritty visuals when needed, and they don't shy away from dark theming. They seem to have approached it with the mindset of, let's just make something good, and whoever likes it, likes it. And wouldn't you know, to this day, the only people I've ever seen watch and enjoy it have been grown-ass adults. Every time I get fixated on media for a tizzy, I manage to find myself in the Twitter subcommunities dedicated to talking about that thing. I got on fucking Mappy Twitter when I made my Mappy video. I didn't even think that was a thing. She-Ra's community seems to entirely consist of 18 to 25-year-old queer people, though maybe I just interact with that demographic more because that describes myself. But it seems like nobody else would truly appreciate the show as much as people like me. And that's awesome that there's an audience that resonates with it that's completely different from the intended one. One of the biggest problems of having a target audience in mind when you're making something is that you risk alienating people who don't fall in that particular demographic. There's a large swath of grown adults who genuinely enjoy Bluey, a show for toddlers, but always have to be embarrassed about it and clarify, well, I only really watch it because my adolescent relative makes me, but it's like really good for a baby show. You are a fucking coward. You shouldn't need to defend yourself. I haven't watched Bluey, but let me tell you, if you say it's good, then I'd be happy to hear your reasons why. There's no logical reason why adults shouldn't have high expectations for media meant for children. I've witnessed years of critics reviewing media for younger audiences and having their opinions disregarded because they're reviewing silly kids shows that aren't meant to be taken seriously. We should have high expectations for children's media. They deserve better. There's a monumental difference between target audiences that are actually intentionally selected by the creator and the target audiences that are mandated by executives. Sesame Street's been running for 70 continuous years because the people involved genuinely want to produce the best possible content for extremely young children. As an adult who has the occasional, albeit rare, big boy opinion, I don't often consider something like Sesame Street to be the pinnacle of content, but by all means, for its target demographic, it's phenomenal. Content for tween and teenage demographics, however, have historically been viewed as lesser by the public, and it's only recently that shows have begun realizing that kids can handle and even want shows with darker and more complex themes. At the end of the day, if your goal is to write a kids show and you end up writing a show that appeals to everybody, you haven't failed at making a kids show, you've succeeded at making a show. The only time the concept of a target demographic is detrimental is if it comes from a place other than the creator and or when it's done for the sake of pandering for the purpose of profit. And I hope one day society reaches a level of media literacy to where they can acknowledge that a target audience isn't the only audience that's allowed to enjoy something. So stop bullying Thomas the Tank Engine Twitter users. I've been seeing the same pattern of normies being like, what the fuck do you mean there's a Thomas the Tank Engine Twitter for like 10 years now, and I don't even like Thomas the Tank Engine. But what if you intentionally make content without a particular audience in mind? Luckily, I have just the manga to analyze with this perspective. Yotsuba. Yotsuba is the second manga written by Kiyahiko Azuma that's published in Dengeki Daioh, a shonen magazine. Shonen manga is manga that's marketed at boys from like 12 to 18. The first of which was Azumanga Daioh, a show about high school girls doing absolutely nothing out of the ordinary, which, you know, is obviously the exact same thing as other shonen classics such as My Hero Academia or Dragon Ball Z. Same audience. Yotsuba is a cozy slice-of-life manga about a 5-year-old girl who's named after the hit slice-of-life manga Yotsuba. She's a weird kid and gets into standard kid hijinks such as murdering women and children despite saying the contrary, bullying a 35-year-old man, and stochastic terrorism directed at people who use air conditioners. Yotsuba's personality consists of doing whatever's funniest in the given moment, usually a mixture of optimism, chaos, and invincibility. She's raised by her single father Yusuke, who's the epitome of trying his best. In the competition of best fictional fathers, he's right below Greg Universe and right above, like, everybody else. He's generally pretty relaxed, with a tendency to go monkey mode whenever necessary. He's one of the primary reasons why I was initially so confused trying to figure out who this was for, because a lot of his screen time I just kinda walk away with the feeling that it's an Azuma self-insert or something, like Azuma's simultaneously trying to capture the joy and whimsy of childhood and the joys of parenthood. One fan-favorite chapter from the manga involves Yotsuba going backpack shopping so she can prepare for school. We see Yotsuba getting excited to start the next chapter of her life, and it leads Yusuke to reminisce on when he first found her in a foreign country and took her under his wing. He tells his friends Jumbo and Yanda, who I'll talk about in a bit, about how he was unsure if he was even fit to be a parent at all. He's a manga translator, so he's not particularly rich, and he lived with his grandma at the time. He was no less dependent than the child he decided to raise, but despite his own insecurities, he still took on the responsibility, and with enough work, Yotsuba claimed him as her father. It didn't matter that he didn't think he was cut out for fatherhood. He treated Yotsuba with kindness from the day he saw her, and that's all it took. It's heartwarming. Now, I know that doesn't seem like much, especially after my whole Catra rant, but let me tell you, when you have 100 chapters of seeing him being an amazing parent, where he does everything he can to make sure Yotsuba learns whatever she can while having as much fun as possible, it's enough to make grown men cry. And I say that because, it actually does. It's a story that resonates with people who either have or aspire to have children. Hell, it resonated with me too, because I relate a lot to Yusuke's insecurities of not being good enough to be a parent. The idea of giving your all so that your kids can have a great life is just objectively heartwarming. You know who doesn't resonate with it? Children, who by all means when I started reading was who I presumed to be the target audience. I've seen Pocoyo. I know that when the protagonist is a toddler, it means that it must be for toddlers. That's the Kids Bop motto after all. But that ain't Yotsuba. Yotsuba's a manga where there's a character for every demographic, and it all boils down into a soup where the answer to the target audience question is whoever sees the green-haired child and wants to laugh. So let's talk about these characters. Yotsuba's best friend is her neighbor Ina, a 9-year-old girl who loves teddy bears and hates Americans' contributions to climate change. She's a smart girl who reads non-fiction regularly and researches frogs for fun, which makes her a perfect friend for Yotsuba, who's so curious that she probably killed Catra. She's arguably the most feminine in the cast, which I think is more of an accident than anything else. I'm pretty sure Azuma just doesn't like writing female characters that are actually feminine. Shout out gender nonconformity. And speaking of which, Mira Hayasaka is Ina's best friend, and she's an absolute delight. She is the government-mandated snarky cynical kid whose rebellious nature is comedically lost on the innocent Yotsuba, and is a fun contrast with Ina. While Ina's the goody two-shoes bookworm of the two, she's also capable of gutting a fish without flinching. Meanwhile, Mira is scared of frogs. Their dynamic is adorable. These two and Yotsuba are the youngins in the cast, and their chapters usually revolve around learning something new or doing something kids would find enjoyable. They're wholesome chungus, and I love them. My favorite recurring joke with these three is when they pretend to be sophisticated members of British society and say quite true, because that's straight up what I did with my sister when I was a kid. I just hear a silly way of speaking and latch onto a specific phrase and then say it all the time. The difference is my silly phrase was Mama Luigi to you, Mario! Ina's the youngest of 3 siblings, the next in line being Fuka Ayase, who is the closest a fictional character can get to perfection that is scientifically possible. She's also my 16th favorite character of all time, if you remember the chart from earlier. Fuka's deal is that she doesn't really have a deal. She's an everyman of a character. She doesn't have any hobbies or skills or interests. She just kind of shows up and is awesome. If aliens wanted a fictional example of an archetypical human who is just good, I'd probably give them Fuka. And as much as I love her, I probably have to do what I did with Bo and just say that she's awesome and move on. I really have nothing to say other than she's the best. The oldest sibling, Asaki, is a college student who has a smoker girlfriend and is a prankster. She and her girlfriend are Yotsuba's cool influences. They teach her how to live on the wild side and bike down a hill and get killed. Asaki's probably my least favorite character in the cast, though she's still awesome. Theoretically, she should be the one that resonates with me the most, and she just doesn't. She doesn't complain about college or her part-time job enough, and she doesn't so much as hold hands with her girlfriend, which I just think is rude. If Azuma was truly going for a teenager college-aged audience, he probably would have utilized her much more than he did. Instead, he tends to steer clear of cynicism and instead focus on the joy and whimsy associated with the different stages of life. And there's nothing that brings more joy or whimsy to a child than when the fun uncle comes over. Jumbo is the fun uncle, and he shows up from time to time to just make Yotsuba's day better. He'll bring over art supplies, he'll take her fishing, he'll build a bookcase for her, he'll bash her head into a door frame, he'll beef with a 9-year-old. He's really just my ideal man. If I didn't want Yusuke so bad, he'd be my top pick, but unfortunately he has a running joke that he wants to be with Asagi, and well, buddy, do I have a Weezer song for you. And finally, we have the bastard elephant in the room, Yanda. Yanda's the most consistently funny character in the manga. In his first appearance, he shows up to Yusuke's house completely uninvited, steals his ramen, and bullies his child. The hatred and malice this man has towards Yotsuba is nothing short of fucking despicable. Not only does he refuse to share his ramen, but he steals Yotsuba's ice cream and then calls her stupid. Yotsuba straight up considers him an enemy. He is the only thing in the universe capable of making her mad. It's absolutely hilarious. I've reported him to the police. What makes Yotsuba's cast so unique is that unlike Azumanga, where everyone has a generic archetype they embody to use as jokes, Yotsuba has a really grounded, down-to-earth cast. Most of the characters feel like actual, real people, which makes them extremely easy to relate to no matter who you are. Any age can vibe with any character and get something out of it. The humor is often situational and steers clear from references whenever possible, which makes the humor timeless and and potentially funny to anybody. The only reference I even noticed was when Yotsuba says she wants to listen to Kyari Pamu Pamu songs, and I'm just like, Yotsuba, do you know what she did? That's disgusting. It feels simultaneously as if Azuma made a conscious effort to make sure the manga could be enjoyed by everyone, and also that he doesn't care who reads it because he only wants to entertain himself. Because it really feels like he just wrote himself at multiple stages in his life. Yotsuba's the representation of his youth, with all the whimsy and curiosity played up. Ina's when he found out he could actually find things he enjoyed by himself instead of having to rely on others around him. Fuka and Asagi are representations of later stage childhood, where you try to enjoy as much as you can and bask in your youth before you become Yusuke and his friends, adults who have jobs and responsibilities but do what they can to enjoy life whenever they can. I fully believe that Yotsuba does not have an intended audience. Its purpose is to be a reminder that life is something that's meant to be enjoyed, no matter who you are, no matter what stage of life you're in. It's a central message that, as obvious as it is when you're just like Yotsuba, is easy to forget when you're anyone else. And while I can't say for certain what the authorial intent behind the manga is, I think it's a manga where Azuma just chronicles everything he finds enjoyable about life. He didn't make the manga to appeal to the typical reader of Dengeki Daioh. There's no way the average shonen fan is begging and pleading for slow-paced slice-of-life content. He made the manga because he wanted to remind himself and others how fun life can be. In American markets, media seems to only have a select few amounts of reasons for existing. Some things are meant to be disposable slop that will be forgotten about in a week, some things are meant to push a political message, but a lot of things are meant solely to make money. I'm a business graduate. I know firsthand that corporate CEOs are taught that you have to make products with a market in mind. You have to know before you start production if your product is going to have mass appeal or niche appeal so that you can figure out your marketing strategies accordingly, and that's so fucking boring. Art shouldn't be strategically planned out as a product, created to appeal to a specific set of people for the purpose of taking their money away. The absolute best art is art where the creators make what they want to, pushing past any limits they might have placed on them and trying to prioritize the quality of the work itself rather than the effectiveness of the marketing. You can say what you want about Dan Versus, but when you try to get your art off the ground and you finally succeed and then have to compromise a part of your vision, the best possible result is that you take what they give you and push it to the limits. Dan Versus is a kids show, but instead of doing the tried and true wacky zany random humor of every other kids show before and after, it instead made biting commentary on the inefficiency of the DMV and the struggles of sustaining yourself when you lack any employable skills. You can say what you want about the She-Ra reboot, but in a climate where so many reboots are soulless cash grabs, you can immediately tell that the creators actually cared about the property they were remaking. She-Ra 2018 was made by people who saw that the original was a rare instance of legitimately empowering female-oriented media in a landscape of soulless pink garbage, and who wanted to do the same thing but better in every way for modern audiences. And you can say what you want about Yotsuba, but the world truly needs more media like it. Media that's made because it makes the creator happy. Media that is human. And media that has Fuka Ayase. I personally have always made my videos with Azuma's I'll make what I want and whoever likes it philosophy. I believe it's what makes my content completely unique on this platform. I'm probably the only person that would have thought to cold open a video about Catra with a 3-minute tangent on Dan Versus. Even if my viewer retention ultimately suffers because of my erratic, highly specific references and tangents, I make them because they're what I think is the best thing I can bring to the table. And who knows, maybe my unfocused ramblings aren't the most effective way to get my point across. But last time I found a common thread to link Azumanga, Daioh, and Weezer, and people seem to resonate with it. You never know who your art will appeal to. But if you just go in trying to make the content you want and don't care at all who finds it, you will probably make someone's favorite thing, because you chose to do your own thing, instead of pandering to a market. Do you think they were pandering to furries when they made Lucky from Pound Puppies so unbelievably attractive?